Stop the Shunning. I'm here with XJW Analyzer, and today we're going to be discussing field service. Field service, babe.
Field service. You know what I never really understood about field service? And of course I would do it. I was a faithful, loyal witness, so I went out regularly like we all did. I pioneered for 7 years actually, but we'll talk about that later. What I didn't understand about field service is why we had a door-to-door thing at all. Because door-to-door salesmen were very much looked down on by the time even I was a kid. Nobody liked when someone would come to the door, even though it would happen occasionally. But what really didn't make any sense is I would think, the reason why the first century Christians went door to door or out the way they did is because that's the only way they could talk to anybody.
Right.
They didn't have phones.
Right.
They didn't have social media. There was no postal service unless you were rich and you could pay a slave, or get a slave to go carry a message to somebody.
Right.
If the first century Christians had YouTube, Facebook, and a postal service, and they would have used that. They wouldn't have been going the way they did, in my opinion, because it's just not very effective. So that I always found it rather strange that they still go door to door. Well, that makes us like the first century Christians. Well, yeah, but the first century Christians used to read scrolls too, but we don't do that anymore because it doesn't make any sense.
And the first century Christians didn't use Google.
Yeah,
that's true. Not exactly following the first century Christians by using the internet.
They didn't have a website, right? So why do you have a website?
No JW.org.
No, not if
back in the day.
You're trying to be like the first century Christians. They did what it made sense to do for the time in which they lived, and that doesn't describe their current preaching work at all. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. And the timing, the arbitrary 9 a.m. Saturday morning. Where's the scripture for that? That didn't happen in the first century. So why? Why do it the way they do it now? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally.
9 a.m. was rough for a lot of people because, people work during the week. They're exhausted by Saturday morning. Saturday morning for a lot of people is their first day off after a long work week. And then they have to get up once again early in the morning, maybe even round up a family. These aren't all single people going out in service, so they have to wake up little kids, get their families together and put on a suit, at 8:30 in the morning, get breakfast or whatever they have to do, and then get out the door to go, knock on people's door unsolicited for no pay. And it was just...
And we were in Texas. Texas. Where by 10 a.m. it's 100 degrees outside in the summer.
Yeah.
And I had very small children. And sometimes when they were really tiny in a carrier, I would have to carry the carrier and this bag and all this literature. Because again, this is before we were showing home movies or whatever at the door. No, you had a bag. And
there was no Netflix at the door.
No Netflix JW videos going on. Yeah. And it was just really difficult to do. Yeah. And even we'd have the stroller, but we had 2 kids who had a double stroller, and that was hard to push uphill. And wow. Those aren't the good memories.
Right.
I do have some good memories, and we're going to talk about that. But in general, it was very difficult to do the way they did it.
At one point, when I was still single, my service group overseer loved this brother. He was really funny, and he had been in that congregation since I think he was like 17 years old. It was one of the oldest congregations in the area, and at the meeting for service, my buddy, I think we were both like 23 or 24 at the time, he was the assistant, sitting next to my service group overseer. And he pulled out the territory and he's assigning the groups for service. And he assigns this one street that's famously known for being super long. And again, this is Dallas, Texas. And it's already 100 degrees, like you were saying, by 9:30 or 10. And so he's organizing the service groups. He gives out this street, and then my buddy who was sitting next to him goes, "Oh man, that's a long street." He looks at the card, the territory card, and he says, "Oh man, that's a long street." And my service group overseer, bless his heart, he was like 70 years old at the time, says, "Well, don't tell them that, dummy." Well, don't tell him that, dummy. So witnesses recognized that this was a difficult work. This wasn't, "Oh, we're so joyful and ready to get out the door, barely awake, barely had our first sip of coffee, and we're ready to do this in heels or, suits or whatever." And so he was having to downplay it because he's like, "Oh God, they're not going to want to do this street in 100 degrees for the next 2 hours."
Yeah, which could be dangerous where we
Yeah.
live too. So you have to be real careful about stuff.
Right. I've had heat stroke twice.
Yeah. It's definitely not like the propaganda videos and
No.
like at the conventions and assemblies. They would always have great experiences. "Oh, I just love the field service." Now there were a few who did.
Yeah.
But most of us were like, "Well, we got to do this for Ja," and so we would do it because we thought it was right.
And here's the thing, householders already think we're nuts. They already are not interested in the message. For the most part, you always had one or two rare experiences where somebody actually wanted to talk to you. But for the most part, people don't want to see you. And then they see you walking from door to door, sweating, armpit stains, drenched in your back, your shirt's drenched. And you just, how is that going to appeal, in all sincerity, how is that going to appeal to people when you look like you're about to have heat stroke? I would see there was little kids from the congregation that, were working either with their parents. I worked with a few of them on occasion, walking from door to door, and they're just red-cheeked and, look like they're about to be sick. And I would have people, say to me and also to these kids, on occasion, would look at them and be like, "Okay, you guys get inside now. Go get some AC. Do you realize, whoo, it's hot out here. What are you guys doing out here?" Because it looks nuts. It doesn't look reasonable.
And even if they like what you have to say, "Oh, well, they really used the Bible. Isn't that great?" What are they going to think? "Yeah, but if I join you people,
I'm going to have to do the
I'm gonna
same
have to
thing."
do
I don't
that.
think so.
No, that's not a good pitch. It's just not a good
Yeah.
bullet point. Why you should join Jehovah's Witnesses. Go out in service when it's 100 degrees in Dallas. No, that's bad. That's not a good thing. And it's not healthy or safe for people to be doing that to begin with. Now, for a while,
And it's also highly insane.
Witnessing. And that was definitely better. It was still hot, but it was definitely better. And the early morning, which I'm not a morning person, I tried that.
I had a heat stroke once in my life, and it does not feel good.
6 a.m. We didn't go doors. We would go to
Not good at all.
laundromats and
Apartment
convenience
laundromats,
stores, stuff like
convenience
that.
stores,
Yeah. And that was actually
Basically, you just feel unwell, and you feel, well, at least it was for this, like me, feel like really unwell, like, I don't know. And the worst part is, it doesn't hurt this bad. It hurts in your head. You just feel unwell. But the worst part is that you just feel like barfing, like really bad.
Where they're not home.
But you don't, well, at least I didn't have to. It was just this really bad feeling. It was not good. Felt like really shitty.
But there's just a lot more people there. So that makes more sense. But getting up at 5 a.m. to do it, I just couldn't do it. It was
no. I never did it.
I tried like 3 times. And then, after almost having cardiac arrest, I said, "No, I can't do this." And I never did it again.
Right.
But what they did just made more sense.
Sure.
When they did it was terrible.
Yeah. So, even though I was not a fan of service, didn't enjoy it, like a lot of us didn't enjoy field service, I tried to make the best out of it. And the way I did that was by working with as many different people as possible. If you've spent any significant time as a witness, you know that not across the board, but generally speaking, pioneers, and I was not a pioneer. I pioneered maybe once or twice in my entire life. Auxiliary pioneered, that's a separate story. Pioneers tend to have a reputation for being gossipy and catty because they spend a lot of time together. And, and again, there's always exceptions. But generally speaking, there was this reputation for pioneers using field service as a platform to talk trash and gossip about other people. and I didn't want to get sucked into that vortex. So I tried to work with as many different people as possible, because I also wanted people to feel, I wanted different people in the congregation, I don't know if special is the word, I just wanted them to feel like they were recognized, they were appreciated, and I didn't want to just work with Sister so-and-so because, Sister Super Pioneer, because everyone, thinks she's amazing or whatever. I wanted to work with different people and show that I appreciated them and wanted to get to know them. And I didn't necessarily have anything against Sister Super Pioneer, and I would work with her and different pioneers. I didn't discriminate, that's the point. I didn't discriminate, I would work with everybody, but I really didn't want to get sucked into that clique mentality of I always have to work with this person or that person. And that made it a little bit more enjoyable for me, even though I was not excited about going out.
Yeah, I pioneered for 7 years, so it's a little different because I had a family and we'd go out and service together, so we'd work with different people. But and the brothers, and this may just be a generic thing from where I was at, they didn't like gossip a lot, a little bit, but it wasn't bad. But what I found was that pioneers would always try to work with pioneers because they knew that other person needed to get their time in too. Because pioneers were perpetually behind in their time. It's always behind in their time. And so they wanted to go out and service with someone who was going to go out and service for a long time with them. And another thing about pioneers that I found, you've heard probably the pioneer shuffle. Now that always irritated me, but that's a real thing because I worked with a lot of pioneers through the years. The pioneers would go really, really slow. They would milk every street, every door, every call. They would walk slow, they would knock slow, they would talk slow. I mean, everything was slow. That's why they called it the pioneer shuffle. Whereas when I wasn't a pioneer, I'm like, look, we have a territory to get through and I want to get done and I only have a certain amount of time and I actually want to do this for the right reasons. So let's move. What are you doing? I don't want to just knock on the door and take 20 minutes to walk to the next one. And so the pioneers would have worked like 4 doors and I'm done with the street. Right. So that always bothered me, that it was more about the time for not everybody.
Not everybody.
I want to be fair. Some people really were genuinely concerned with talking to people. But for a lot of people, it was about getting hours in. And that's just the wrong motive.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because the time culture surrounding field service and pioneering really bothered me. Mm-hmm. In fact, I got to the point where I stopped using magazines or literature or anything JW org specific at the doors. I literally just went to the door with a scripture in mind and wanted to have a genuine conversation with people, not look at me, I'm walking door to door and I'm a pioneer and look at how many placements and all that stuff. And again, to be fair, there are some really good, genuine pioneers out there. But the rest are spoiling the name. Let's just put it that way. The rest of the pioneers out there are spoiling it for the really sincere, good pioneers. But I just wanted to have a thought in mind and share something from the scriptures, because isn't that the whole point? We're supposed to be, teaching people about the Bible. Right. So that whole time culture and pioneer clique culture just didn't sit right with me. And so that's another couple of things, because I keep going back to this. Well, you're not really like the first century, so stop saying you're like the first century. First, most witnesses they're trying to push publications, right? Whereas, and I would do it too, I would just go to the door with a Bible, and you had to wear the suit. When it wasn't super hot, I'd wear a suit coat. And I would tuck the magazines in the inner pocket of the coat because I didn't want them to see. And I wouldn't bring a bag to the door as time went on. First of all, it's really painful. We got little kids trying to keep track of all that. I needed my hands free. But also, I didn't want someone who came to the door, looked at the people or whatever, to see me with magazines. All I wanted them to see was me, maybe my son or my daughter, and a Bible, and that's it. So that they would know I wasn't there to push something. If Watchtower wanted to be like the first century, they would only talk from the Bible, because that's all that the first century had.
and they didn't even have a scroll or anything. That was very expensive back then. So people would just show up and just talk. There was no literature, nothing. They would talk about what they knew. They would remember and quote from memory the references and prophecies and things like that. So if you really want to be like the first century, that's what you should do. And the other thing is no connection
he
to the first
moved.
century at all is
Wow.
the whole concept of time, punching a clock. There are no scriptures anywhere in the New Testament that talk about, Jesus didn't say when the apostles came back and he was talking about, I perceive Satan falling from heaven, now turn in your time. He never did that. There were no time cards. There were no requirements. People just did what they did. And if it went well, great, because it was more people-oriented and not time-oriented. It was actually Joseph Rutherford who introduced the time card in the 30s, I believe it was. It might have been the early 40s. So he was all about that tracking and control, because he was kind of a control freak, and I talk about that a lot on my channel. So that's where it came from. It has no connection to Scripture at all. So if you want to be like the first century, only use the Bible, and consider yourself lucky to have one, because they couldn't afford that in the first century. And don't count time.
My mother used to say, says, Jesus wasn't out there with a stopwatch. My mom's from Brooklyn, in case you haven't met her on the channel. Yeah, Jesus wasn't out there with a stopwatch, you know. So
I mean, they even down to how long you could take a break. You could, if you took longer than 15 minutes to take a break. Who takes 15 minutes? By the time you get in the car, get to McDonald's, because nobody went to McDonald's, or in Dallas, QT was a big one.
And Starbucks. It was
Starbucks.
It was QT, Starbucks, and McDonald's. That was the trifecta.
We all had our favorites, right?
Right.
You know, by the time you got there and you got something to eat or drink and went to the bathroom, there's no way you're spending less than half an hour. And you're supposed to stop your time. If you stop for longer than 15 minutes, nobody did that. Nobody did that. Like, man, I got my butt out of bed at 6 a.m. to get the kids ready, to go to the hall, and I had often took the group out, so I had to prepare, okay, what am I going to talk about this morning? And I went out in service. Jehovah's going to forgive me for not stopping my time, not stopping. Forget that.
I knew sisters who used to say, oh, I have a return visit at the local, it would be like the local donut shop. It would be like, oh, I have a return visit at Krispy Kreme. And other people in the car like didn't catch it. And they'd be like, oh, really? That's great. Oh, we can't wait to meet them. And then we pull up, and then she's like, yeah, I'd like a Boston cream and
I got a Bible study with a Boston cream.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So that was like one of their first stops. Yeah, people would take breaks really early on too in the day territory.
When I was a little kid, that was the only thing I liked about field service, because it's hard enough on adults, but little kids, it's rough. It's rough on little children. But my dad, when I would go out in service with him as a little kid, he always wanted to stop at Dunkin' Donuts. Because he loved their coffee. My dad was Cajun, and they like that strong coffee, like Seaport or Community, and that's what Dunkin' used back then. They would use Seaport where I grew up. That's some strong stuff. So my dad loved that.
Grows hair on your chest.
Yeah, really. And he had
talking
plenty,
about me.
So I'm the white one and
I like dark
hair
coffee. Yeah.
So I would always get a donut. And that was, if I have to suffer through service, at least I'm going to get a donut. So that was okay.
My dad used to take me to, was it Shipley's or something that was like Shipley's Donuts? Yeah, and I enjoyed that.
We loved our donuts. That's true. All the witnesses go to see them.
Right. But something I do have to say, you were mentioning about how it's hard on kids. If you're not a Jehovah's Witness or a former Jehovah's Witness and you're watching this, and a child or a teenager comes to the door and you're not interested, please be nice to them. Seriously, please be nice to them. They're there against their will. They have been pressured to adopt an ideology they don't fully understand. They can't understand. They're minors. They have no personal agency. And they are being forced to, get up early. A lot of them, they have school, not homeschool, but public school all week. They're exhausted, they have homework, and then they got to get up on Saturday morning. They don't want to. They're pressured to adopt this ideology and go confront strangers and communicate this belief system that they might not even be interested in, and have to deal with this. And then they get flack from the householder. We're not interested, or, get out of here, and slam in the door. I'm not saying that you got to get into a big discussion about it. You got to keep your child isolated and in a bubble and away from people, and they have to learn how to communicate with others. But this is a completely different story. You are pushing them into this work, and they didn't ask for it. They did not consent to be part of this corporation and work for this corporation like little slaves door to door with Watchtower literature. So again, I say that if you're not a former Jehovah's Witness and you're not interested and don't want to see them at your door, if you see a kid or a teenager, please be kind to them, because they don't want to be there, I guarantee.
That's the truth. I will say that the great majority of people were nice when there was a kid, because I would bring my kids out in service, and when the little kids were at the door, I noticed people were a lot nicer than they would be if it was just me. And I actually had a very funny experience about that. There was this lady when I lived in Louisiana. She's mean. Hated going to her door. She was always rude, always mean, always slammed the door. But you're not supposed to skip doors, and I was the true believer at the time, so I wouldn't skip a door. And she was always mean to me. So I get this territory. I'm like, oh, God, I got to work this territory again. That lady's there. But Damon was with me. And his little brother, John, at the time was like 3 years old, maybe 4 years, little bitty kid. I took the coward's way out, because I knew that
the coward's way.
I gave
Coward's way.
The Paradise Tract. You remember that? I forget what it was called. Basically, the ukulele Paradise Tract. It was really pretty. Had the little garden scene on the front. I gave it to John, and I walked behind John, but John was taking this door. And little John, little John's little head. I knocked, and I kind of back up, and like I said, I know this lady's always mean. She opens the door. Little John holds that tract up and says, "I want you to be in paradise with me." And that lady just melted. How can you
resist, Little John?
She just melted down. I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Well, I was off the hook. It was the only time that door ever went well for me. Right. She didn't even give me the evil eye. Nothing.
Well, good. Good, yeah. Be nice to the kids.
Yeah, be nice.
They don't understand what they're a part of. Yeah.
So, they just, they're doing what they're told to do.
Fake it till you make it. Yeah. Be nice to the kids.
Yeah. Very small children, and sometimes the very old witnesses did much better at the door, because people would either be nice because they were little kids, or they would be respectful because the person was elderly. Mm-hmm. Like my dad, he's had a bad lower back, and he walked with a cane when he would walk out in service. And he just looked very stately and regal, and he was, very, very well polished and presented. And people would always be respectful to him. Mm-hmm. But then I would go to the door, and it's a totally different story. I'm like, look, you're middle-aged, or not middle-aged back then, you're 20-something, early 30s, young punk, I have no...
Right. We're not sparing you.
Yeah, get away from my door, but not dad and not the little kids. So it was different, depending on who you were.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Either end of the spectrum, they chilled out a little bit. Householders tended to chill out a little bit.
Yeah, it was better. For those of you who are watching this that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, or maybe went to a few meetings or something but never actually went out in service, this is the basic rundown of how it works. Every congregation has a certain territory, they have boundaries, either within the city, or if you're in a rural area, it might be county, the whole county, or counties, because I've done that too. And they would break up the territory into maps on cards. It's probably all digital now, but when I was in, it was on cards. And you had a certain territory to work. Each car group was assigned a street or a set of streets, and you had to take notes on the street. Yeah. You want to talk about that, the whole not at home thing?
Yeah. So if the householder was not at home, back up. On these slips, you had legends of like C is for child, right. M is for man, W woman, and you had to put very detailed. I talk about this in another video. about how Jehovah's Witnesses use your information or collect your information from door to door in their door-to-door preaching in the 3 important things you need to know before studying with Jehovah's Witnesses video. I did this a couple of months back or a couple of weeks back. I lose track of time. But the way they collect your information, they write very detailed notes. And I know in several European countries now, they're banned from doing
That's
that.
not allowed.
That was
Yeah.
such a win that they can't do that now.
But in the U.S., householders are not protected the same way, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, so on these slips, they write very detailed notes, and one of the notes that we were instructed to take from door to door was not at homes. So you literally knock on the door, nobody's home, you have to stop. And here's the thing that I
Yeah,
really,
that's
really
especially
didn't
not allowed,
was
to notify
standing-
people that you're not at
Even
home
when I
at
was an
certain
active witness,
times.
I did not
That's
like
totally
standing
not
in front of
allowed.
people's homes. Like imagine walking up the pathway to their door, knocking, no one's home supposedly. I don't really know if they were home or not. And then walking away, and then sisters would pull out their book, either a Bible or another book, a notebook, and would write, okay, what house is this? And get the number, and just stand in front of their house collecting information. It made me really uncomfortable because I was thinking, what if somebody really was home and they're peeking through the blinds going, what are they doing?
They're casing the joint.
They're casing
you know?
the joint, standing in front, so no, they're not necessarily going to rip off your stereo or your iPad or whatever was sitting inside your house, but they're taking notes about not at homes, and it just really made me uncomfortable, and I didn't like to do that, and it was just really inconvenient because you had to stop after each door that was not at home and write down all this information. So after a while, I just got sick of that. I never took not at homes. Some sisters would be like, so you keeping not at homes? And would like elbow me. I would just write down the homes that were there because after you work, 20, 30 houses and 28 are not home, I'm just putting the 2 that were there,
Mm-hmm.
And then I would turn it in, and I think my field service overseer was not amused. But I said, these 2 were home, so look at the street, Brookstone, Brook Creek,
Yeah.
Creek Mountain, whatever the name was, always some mashup.
Yeah.
And then nobody was home except these 2 homes. That's just how I
Yes.
started to kick against the system.
There was one guy, one young brother too. He's a ministerial servant. Man, this guy's memory was amazing because he would work the whole street, right? But he was a servant, so if you weren't in a position of any kind of responsibility, you can do like what Beth did. You can I'm not doing it that way, and they wouldn't give you too hard of a time about it. But he was a servant, so he had to follow the rules.
Right.
He would memorize every not at home number, and at the end of the street, would get in the car and write them all down. And I kept track once, and he was not wrong.
Like a server.
I mean, like, wow. Yeah, exactly. Like a
Burger, fries, no
they
pickles,
can-
hold the mayo. And
For
then,
27 people
yeah,
at the
27.
table, they can remember it all. This guy could
Yeah,
do
that's
that. And I
crazy.
envied that. I'm like, man, I wish I could remember those numbers.
Right.
And what you did was even better, but I couldn't get away with that because you were a servant. Now you got to follow the rules. And the reason they did that is because you would go back. There were like not at home days where everyone would break out their not at homes and go work all the not at homes to try to get people home.
Yeah.
But it was such a waste of time because nobody was ever home. If you work all week and Saturday morning or Saturday and Sunday are your only days off,
Yeah.
are you going to be at home? Now, some people, yes, a few people would. First of all, you're going to be up that early. And second of all, that's the only time you have to get stuff done. So you're not going to be home all day.
Yeah.
90% at least.
Oh, at least 90%
90% not home. I remember I worked one street. This is back in Plano in Texas. It was a long street. We must have had 30, 40 houses because we worked both sides. Not a single person.
I remember working whole developments where it was like crickets.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. Nobody was even really playing outside. It's like in that suburb,
No
people
children.
were working their butts off to pay for homes that they didn't need, to buy things that they didn't need, to impress people they didn't even like.
Very materialistic.
Very materialistic area. And speaking of these really expensive neighborhoods, lined with McMansions, what really bothered me is that a lot of the friends And this is, you know, there's nothing wrong with having nice things. It's obviously your attitude towards them and whether you think it makes you better than other people or whatever. But the friends would get in their Cadillac Escalades and Mercedes and drive into low-income neighborhoods.
Yep.
You know, or would be doing their Pioneer Shuffle or their Pioneer Hours, driving around in parking lots trying to find people to accost, you know, with their Starbucks latte in hand in their expensive car, telling people about how the world is terrible and how it needs to change and how we need to keep our eyes simple. And it was just such a disconnect from the message.
Keep your eyes simple. And that one, and I love these people. They're wonderful people. Would drive their Jag out in service occasionally. Like, you can't tell people to keep your eyes simple when you're in a Jag. I mean,
it's your right to have a Jag. Good for you. But
that's an awesome. I love it. Beautiful car.
But don't go into a low income neighborhood and try to share the good news. It just yeah.
And what's funny about that, to me, what I always found interesting about that is, and this is just an aside, not directly related to field service, the Watchtower has always discouraged higher education. They have always discouraged higher education. But in this particular area, which is very well to do, in fact, Plano was the wealthiest city, mid-sized city, about 250,000 people in the country at that time. I don't know what it is now. A lot of Fortune 500, a lot of Fortune 100 companies based in this town. A lot of the brothers, anyway, I don't know about the sisters, a lot of the brothers had degrees, master's degrees, engineers, you know, I didn't know too many PhDs, but a lot of master's degrees, a lot of engineers, a lot of draftsmen, architects, things like that in this area. So how they thought it was okay for them to ignore Watchtower direction, I always found that interesting, especially because these were elders. These weren't just, you know, fringe members. We're talking about elders with these degrees. And even though the witnesses have the lowest rate of higher education in the country of any other religious group, it's like 9% have higher education. I think half of them lived in this metro because there were just so many, and they would drive these flashy cars into the barrio, you know, the low-income housing areas, and it's just terrible.
I remember working from door to door with, I hopped around to different congregations. There was a couple of moving pieces, but because my parents were in one congregation, I was with them for a little bit, and then I ended up moving out on my own and being in a separate congregation completely on the opposite side of town. But I remember at one point when I was in this area that you're discussing, there was a young sister, I think she was like 15 or 16 at the time, and her father was either the service overseer or coordinator, I don't really remember, but we were walking from door to door, and we go to a door, and she says, yeah, my father and all the elders are getting together for their fancy, she used the word fancy, for their fancy monthly elders dinner. They go to a big fancy restaurant, my dad and all the elders, and they get together, and and I'm gonna hang out with my friends and tonight, and they're gonna go do that. And it was just, I don't know. And again, there's nothing. Go to dinner. Right. Have your elders meeting. But it just felt like the culture was so different from.
Are you kidding me?
When you were
Oh my God.
There was so many disconnects between what we're telling people in field service and how people lived and behaved.
Yeah. And now I had lived in poor areas too.
Yeah.
When I lived in Louisiana, I lived in rural Louisiana, way out in the sticks, and where the need was greater, and that's why I moved there. They were very poor, and yet they would donate just as much as a congregation every month as the wealthy congregation that we were in. You were in shortly, and I was in it for a long time.
And then I left to
Yeah.
a different area. Yeah.
And that really bothered me because I thought, the brothers and sisters in Louisiana, they couldn't afford what they were giving. They really were the 2 small coins of very little of value or whatever that the widow gave.
Of course,
they were those people.
Right.
donations are kind of the same because poor people tend to be less, not intelligent, but less educated, and thusly they spend more money on bullshit.
Worst experience ever out in service in that town. Now this was when I lived on the west side. Like the worst side was the west side. East was still pretty bad, but the west, that's where all the cash was. The new
We're in
was on
heroic.
the west side. I went out in service in somebody's Mercedes, and I was sitting in the back seat with this other brother, and this brother did not have a degree. This brother owned a produce truck. So he did by anybody's standards, this guy made a lot of money, but not as much as the other brothers in this particular congregation. And no lie, I'm not making this up, I promise to you. He was complaining to me because, quote, I can't take care of my family the way I want to. And now, in comparison to the other people in the hall, he did have less than they did. But at the time, I was so broke, I didn't have any furniture in the one-bedroom apartment I was living in. And someone had to give us some furniture out of the kindness of their heart. So I'm sitting there listening, I'm trying to be understanding. Oh, well, that's terrible, brother. And then, on his anniversary, he bought his wife a Mercedes.
Very skewed perspective.
God, no.
Come on, it was nice.
Fuck,
It was one of those
we're so boned.
What was SLK class? Really nice ragtop sports car.
Meanwhile, there's
Mercedes.
families in the congregation that
Pulling
are really
those
struggling
three together is a
And
really,
I'm
really
sleeping
bad
on an air
idea.
mattress.
sleeping on an air mattress.
Oh wow!
and-
It's just the priorities were so skewed sometimes.
the priorities.
Most
and
of the time it does
that's
not
basically
end
it.
well
There's
if you
nothing
do
wrong
that.
with these
No, of course
things,
not.
but
Ever
it-
play
you
this
know,
dungeon,
especially
don't
with
do
Warcraft
this.
and-
It's not a good
People
idea.
That they need to keep their eyes simple. Don't tell other people that they should shirk all material gain if you're going to live like that.
If you're gonna live like that,
And
yeah.
don't tell
Okay, we were able to do it, but believe me, this is one of the worst ideas you could have in basically all the dungeons. This is one in all the dungeons that still exist in the state they do nowadays in the whole game. This is one of the hardest, basically encounters in the whole game.
The culture, you vary just as much as anybody else does. You're not as united as you claim, and you learn that.
The only reason why that didn't happen a lot, well,
Alright,
there's
I'm
probably a
calm
lot of reasons. I haven't looked
Let's
at our
get into
gear,
some of
but
the
we're probably
experiences, we had some
really hard out geared,
fun
or
experiences.
we're way too good geared.
Great, hilarious.
And also, I
experiences
think
we
at
had.
least one or two of them know
Oh,
what
yeah,
they're
show business
doing.
of going out in service. You want to start with one?
Yeah, you meet a lot of
They
interesting
probably
characters,
popped
and
all their
sometimes those
cooldowns.
characters are your brothers and sisters.
And yeah, it worked out in the end. But usually that's just a death sentence.
She was hilarious. Late 50s, I think, at the time. And we were having a conversation door to door about whether I was single at the time. And I was like, yeah, I am. And we're getting to the door. She knocks on the door. She says, girl, I used to have those... What do you call them? She knocks on the door, and she's talking to me. She says, I used to have those things. What do you call them again? Oh, yeah, wet dreams.
At the door?
The person's coming to the door. Like, I hear their footsteps. I hear their footsteps in the hallway of their home. They're like jiggling the screen door to open the door. And she says wet dreams, like, as they're jiggling the door.
Oh, that's messed up.
So... Yeah, I mean, I appreciate her being so open with me.
I got one for you. That one made me think of this one too. Again, older sister. This is in the rules of
they're the best.
out in the
That's-
bowels of Louisiana. We're way out in the middle of nowhere. Little bitty town, Anacoco, Louisiana. 600 people in the stoplight. That's all it was.
Yeah.
And I go to the store with this sister. I would love to tell you her name, but I'll leave that out of it. She knocks on the door.
Yeah, nice.
This young woman comes to the door, and she's pregnant. This sister starts her presentation, and the lady says, let me just stop you right there, because I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in God. And now let me tell you, in the rules of Louisiana, you do not get many
That's true.
atheists, but there was a military base there.
Okay.
So sometimes you would get people who aren't from around there. Right? You're not from around here, are you? And this sister looks at this woman and says, "Is your baby gonna be a monkey?"
Oh my God. You gotta love the older sisters.
At the time, I thought it was hilarious.
Little old sister.
Yeah, this little old sister, your baby gonna be a monkey?
They have no filter.
No filter.
They've earned it. They've earned the right.
Oh Lord, yeah. OG,
to say whatever the hell they want, even if it's out the door.
And of course, the lady slammed the door. Good for her. That's what
yeah.
she should have done. I'd slam it too now. What a terrible thing to tell someone.
Mess.
Is your baby gonna be a monkey? In Texas, something I ran into more than once, because there's such a large Hispanic population. The Spanish-speaking people who knew about witnesses, which most of them, they knew that they could get out of it with the English witnesses by saying they don't speak English.
Right.
No habla inglés. No habla inglés.
No habla
But
inglés.
sometimes you would get a young person that you knew could speak English. You're not 15 years old in the United States going to high school. You can't speak English. Come up to the door. No habla inglés.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Try to
Like,
get out of it.
I know you could speak English. Just cut the crap.
Or how about when they come to the door with the phone? Like, I'm on the phone, I can't
Yes.
talk, and then it rings.
Yeah,
That's happened to me.
that's happened to me too. The phone rings. Like, yeah, you gonna take that? Really?
Yeah, exactly. On another occasion,
Yeah,
I
stuff
was
like this
working
would
with
not
some
happen in
overseas
Germany.
wife,
They would they
and
just
it was
like
at
this.
9:45,
Go away.
10 a.m. on a Saturday. We're driving by a public park, and there's a lot of people.
Fuck
at the park,
off.
And there's a lady that's jogging. Like, I'm turning around, I'm circling around the park, and there's a lady jogging, and the circuit overseer's wife, who was a lovely woman, but she says, "Oh, pull over really quick." And I thought something was wrong, so I pulled over. And she jumps out to hand the lady who's jogging a magazine.
Oh god.
The lady is jogging, and the circuit overseer's wife jumped out of the car to stop the jogging lady to give her a magazine. So.
Oh, that's just wrong. Of all the times you're not going to do anything but piss somebody off.
I'd be like, oh my god.
I'm jogging.
Seriously?
No way.
Leave me alone,
Oh,
nothing was
you
stopping her.
Do you ever have anybody come to the door naked? That's happened to me.
I've had some tasty treats come to the door in their boxer shorts, but not completely naked.
I've had people come to the door completely naked. And let me tell you, they're never attractive. I'm like, if you're gonna come to the door naked, look good. At least I'll get something out of it. I don't care.
Down boy.
But no, that would happen. And I used to think, why would you do that? What if I was like FedEx? Well, I don't know. Maybe not. Let me not get into that. Maybe they had reasons. But it didn't make any sense to me. Why would you go to the door with no...
Oh, wait,
Get a
see,
towel,
alright.
something.
Well, but
Wrap
how old
yourself.
were you at the time?
Please
I was in
still
my
be
20s.
In
here.
your 20s.
Yeah.
A sweet little
Oh come on.
You know.
Oh wait. There you
Bible
are.
carrying.
Yay, they're still
Yeah.
here.
She wanted to.
Maybe that was, but they would. There's no way it could be that because they
She
would have
wanted to
had.
corrupt you?
How would they know? How could they get undressed that fast?
You were clean cut, and she wanted to give you a thrill.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
But just like the Wet Dream sister, full disclosure, older sisters just told me things. I remember being like 21 or 22 years old, even younger, and it was completely unprompted. I don't know. It's like I had a sign on my forehead, "Tell me your private business." I don't know. But older sisters, with life experience would just tell me stuff. And I remember when I was like, I think I had just turned 22, and we had moved into a new congregation. And I remember the coordinator's wife, and she was in her 60s, late 60s, and she wanted to work with me door to door. And I was new there, and I was like, yeah, sure. And so we're walking door to door, and it's the first block, like it's 10 a.m. on a Saturday, first block. She proceeds to tell me about her husband's indiscretions and going into very heavy adult things. And I don't know this person. You don't know me. But she just needed somebody to unload on. I don't know. But so she's telling me these things. And mind you, here I am, the 22-year-old, who's actually trying to keep my mind on the task at hand. I have my Bible, and I'm like, trying to do this work. I don't want to be here. I'm trying to have the right frame of mind and get my thoughts together to go to the first door. And so we're walking along, and as we're getting up to the first door, I'm knocking on the door, and and mind you, this whole time she's telling me this story about, and this was her first husband. Let me back up. Her first husband. I think she was on husband number 3. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Now I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
Right.
So her first husband. And so she gets to the door. I get to the door and I knock on the door, and she says, and so anyways, I got to his office. I opened the door, and he was doing his secretary on the desk. Oh, hi, good morning.
Out in service. What was that
Yes,
about?
my name is Bethany, and I'd like to share a positive Bible message with you.
And they would always tell us, when you're out in service, talk about
spiritual things.
Nobody talked about, most people didn't talk about spiritual things. At least it was never the dominant conversation, Wow.
And I just, you talk about having appropriate conversation and keeping your mind on spiritual things, and it's just really, really interesting. I got an interesting perspective as a 21 or 22-year-old sister in the hall.
The naked thing at the door made me think of this one. I was very naive as a teenager. I grew up born in the religion. I moved to Virginia when I was 19 years old because there was a sister there, and that's a long story, and I was interested in the sister, and so I moved over there. And I would go to the laundromat because it was all I could afford. I had a roommate who was a brother serving in the hall, and I'd go to the laundromat and do my laundry. And I go there once, it was Halloween, and I remember it was Halloween because they were playing this movie at the laundromat. It was a horrible movie to be playing in public. And they're playing this movie, and the only other person in the laundromat is this, probably about my age, maybe a year or two older than me, girl. And I'm always in witness mode because I'm pioneering at the time, right? So I bring up the movie. I'm like, well, why are they playing that in a public place? Blah, blah, blah. And I find my end to witness to it. So I do that, and I'm so naive, stupid me. I get her address. Because that's what they told you to do, right? Well, if you find some interest, you want to be able to follow up.
Score!
Yeah. Get her address. And she gave it to me. She gave me her phone number and her address, right? Naive, pioneer, little dude me. I get this old sister, and I get all dressed up in service, and I go to her door, dressed for service, because I'm thinking I'm going to continue the conversation. And to be fair, I had the whole
She wanted
conversation
to
about,
score.
I was just witnessing. There was no personal stuff going on. So from my very naive perspective, I assumed she was just interested in the message. We get to the door, knock on the door. She opens the door. First of all, she's holding her baby.
Baba.
And second of all, she sees me in the suit and the old lady next to me, and her face, the countenance just drops.
Oh, yeah.
And
Man,
that's
that was a
when it
letdown.
hit me that she wasn't interested in the message.
She wanted to inspect your Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think she wanted a daddy for her babies. But whatever the case, just wow. So naive to the world. But that turned out to be a hilarious experience further down the road. Now, the guy who studied with me was old school. When I was 15 years old, I got baptized. His name was Brother Glover, and he was ancient of days when he was studying with me. He died when he was like 94. So good for him, lasted a long time. But he would put his foot in the door. He'd wear steel toe boots, and he would put his foot in the door and not let people close the door. And that used to scare me to death. I'm like, man, Brother Glover, you can get shot.
Right.
And he carried a pocket knife. And he would bang on people's door. He would take
I
paint
wish I could say I was surprised.
off the door
Yeah.
with his pocket knife. And I was 15 years old. I'm scolding him like, Brother Glover, you're like damaging this guy's door. He was so hardcore, we called him the Glove. The Glove. like he was some kind of villain or
Yeah.
something. But he was a really nice, sweet old guy.
Sure.
He just had those old school
ways about him.
Yeah, those old Rutherford teachings, you know. And he was.
That's just what they knew,
That's
you know. And there was another sister who, well, she wasn't as hardcore in that way, but she was like in her 40s, like mid 40s, so she was younger than Brother Glover. But I remember working door to door with her, and she would just, again, Saturday morning, bang on the door, just whap, 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 whap. And she'd be like, well, how are they going to hear us? Wait, I'm like, dude, like, people are trying to, they don't want to, they really don't want to see us.
Yep.
They're probably sleeping in, or, you know, they're enjoying their families or whatever, but that's just like, again, how do you appeal to people when you give a Gestapo knock? And I told her that. It was like boom, 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 and that just really bothered me, and needless to say, I worked with her maybe twice, and I just couldn't get around that. It was just really inconsiderate to bang that loud. The whole neighborhood would hear it.
I was visiting my aunt, similar situation, in New Jersey. Oh, goody.
Not gonna yell anymore.
How much fun.
Ooh, he noticed it.
Yeah.
And she was a pioneer. I think she was a special pioneer. So we went out and serviced a lot. And I was working with this one brother, elder, in the hall that she went to. And he goes to the door, and he knocks on the door, and the person comes to the door, and he's woken this person up. It's obvious this person is a night shift worker, which makes it even worse, because that means they probably just got to sleep, and he woke them up. The guy keeps giving his presentation. And you can see this bleary-eyed dude sort of leaning on the door, like he doesn't care at all. And finally, the guy says, no, I'm not interested, whatever, he closes the door. We're walking away. And the elder says that he didn't apologize to the householder, because if somebody's house was on fire, you wouldn't apologize for going to the door and saving them if you had to wake them up. Like, that is the rudest, most ridiculous line of reasoning I had ever heard, and even at the time, I thought it was ridiculous.
And also, that was an illustration, for those who don't know, who didn't grow up as witnesses, that was an illustration that was often used to justify the preaching work. Well, you know, this world's going to burn, it's going to, you know, Armageddon's coming, you got to warn people, so wouldn't you warn someone if their house was on fire?
Burn, motherfucker. Burn.
On another occasion, during a service break, an older sister in our congregation who was known for being a gossip, and her husband was an unbeliever, and every opportunity at the meetings, she would rag him. She would talk about her unbelieving husband. And I'm just thinking, what if he believes one day and he becomes a witness, where he starts visiting the Kingdom Hall, and then, you know, he's going to walk in and people are going to have this view of him and judge him based on what she said for years, ragging him in her comments. But anyways, so she was a piece of work. But during a service break, she's drinking her coffee, and somebody, I forgot exactly how the conversation went, but she said something to the effect of, well, Willie the angel is watching over us. He's watching over our work. She named an angel because Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the angels are watching them through their preaching work and protecting them through the preaching work.
Willie.
But even at the time, I thought that was really disrespectful.
Yeah.
Willie the angel, like, she named a random angel that she thinks was watching over her in the group, and
That's funny. There were a lot of characters. There are a lot of characters in that organization, which, you know, that's no different than any other. You always got characters in any big group like that. But speaking of characters, sometimes I could be one of those characters. I'm sure people have stories about me, because I'm not a very observant person, as I'm sure Beth can attest to.
That is true. It's okay, I love you anyway.
Oh my god! Open affection.
Oh, that ought to get some views.
He showed openly affection in the wild. Oh my god.
Rural Louisiana was where all the weirdest stuff happened. He was an older fellow, he was retired. And it was just a doorstep study. You know, we would have some studies, you'd go in the house, sit down for an hour, whatever. This guy wasn't one of those. He would just cover a couple paragraphs, talk about a few scriptures, whatever, and leave. Well, he was gone for a while, about a month. And I went back. I would keep trying to go back, and he wasn't home. And finally, he was home. And I'm like, oh, hey, nice to see you. How you been? What's new? It's been a while. And he points down and he says, well, they took off my leg.
Ooh.
He had his leg amputated, and I didn't notice that had happened. I told that story to Covert Fade, and his response was, Covert's response was he hopping mad?
Yeah. Hi, Covert.
That's such a Covert thing to say. Oh, yeah. It was very interesting. In Louisiana, too, it's always Louisiana. We had a lot of Pentecostals, and I'm talking about Holy Ghost catching, speaking in tongues folks. And when we would get to the door, sometimes they would catch the Holy Ghost and they would start speaking in tongues. And which I always thought was fascinating because, a lot of people, they were afraid, ooh, that's demonic, and they would back up from the door. Not me. I'm like, what are you saying? I want to know. I was really interested in it. Yeah. But I remember once I went to a door, and it must have been a preacher because it was this guy, and he was dressed up. And if you were gussied up in rural Louisiana, you were the politician or preacher, one of those two.
Didn't somebody ask you that once?
Yeah, somebody asked me. I went to a gas station, and I was in a suit, and she said, are you a preacher or a politician? Because it's always one or the other. Well, I assumed he was a preacher because he had a bunch of old biddies sitting around in the front room, and you could see him. And he was pleasant and, willing to talk a little bit. But as soon as I said the name Jehovah,
Yahweh.
the women in the back caught the Holy Ghost and started speaking in tongues. Oh, my Jesus! And the preacher was so embarrassed at their behavior at the time, and I used to think that was just so funny. They caught the Holy Ghost when, of course, back then I'm like, oh, we'll see, it's because it said God's name, and that made Satan mad, and so they caught the Holy Ghost, which is demonic. Yeah. A lot of weird stuff happened out in the rules. We had a church not far from where I lived that was one of the snake handling churches, where they would handle snakes as a sign that they had the Holy Spirit, which I think is it at the end of Mark? I forget. At the end of one of the Gospels, it talks about that if you have the Spirit, you can handle snakes and all that. There's spurious additions to the Gospels. Yeah, we had one of those in our territory. Yeah, we had some crazy people living out there in the rurals of Louisiana. I'll tell you what. Man, this talking about Louisiana is just bringing back a lot of memories. I went to a door once and it was a farm. Out in Louisiana, again, rules, hours between doors, miles between doors, and a lot of these people had farms, even if they were just small family farms. There was a guy out in the field with a horse and a plow. I kid you not. This was not a tractor. It was a horse and a plow, and I was working with one of the elders. And in Louisiana, you just walked to wherever people were. You didn't. If there was nobody at the door and you saw somebody in the field, you walked out in the field. That's just how it was. So we walked out to the field, and the elder, this particular elder, very intelligent guy, he asked the householder, he's like, why do you use a horse and a plow? I mean, can't you get a tractor or something like that? The guy's response was, it was good enough for my daddy. It's good enough for me. And people used to talk about the King James Bible back then too. Yeah. I actually had a guy tell me it was good enough for Jesus. The King James Bible was good enough for Jesus. It's good enough for me. And people would say, well, this is the original. They really were that uneducated. They had no clue. It's crazy that the people we run into.
So when I was growing up, there were a few circuit overseers that would talk about, when it comes to Bible studies, they would say stop watering dead stumps. Basically, stop going to homes or householders or Bible students that have made no progress. Because there were some people who would study with someone for 10 years. Yeah, literally, years they'd study with someone, and that person is making no progress, meaning they're not getting baptized. And I just thought that was so bizarre and hypocritical that there are witnesses that would invest so much time and energy into helping these strangers who obviously weren't strangers after years. But if those same witnesses had grown children that were done with the organization or had no interest. Not bad people. Grown children that are decent, good people that are just not interested, that don't want any part of the organization. They're shunned and treated as if they're dead. But you will go spend time watering these dead stumps, trying to invest more time and energy that's just a waste into somebody who you know has no interest or intention, I should say, of getting baptized. But it's all for the time, the time, the time and the image, and keeping up appearances that I have a Bible study. But what are you accomplishing?
Yeah.
That person appreciates the fact that you take them to their doctor's visits and help them paint their house and babysit their kids and do things for them, and you're a friend or some kind of emotional outlet or therapist for that person. They're not really interested in the message or the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses. You're just their buddy. You're their best friend that comes and visits them and listens to them and helps them. And that just really bothers
that's a
me.
good point, that they'll put so much time and energy into someone who clearly has no real interest in the religion, but they won't put any time or energy into their kids who have no interest in the religion. But yeah, it's very hypocritical. Yet another double standard.
Yeah.
Oh, let me think. What else was there about dogs? Dogs were a problem depending on where you live. Like in Louisiana, rural Louisiana, in the town I grew up in Southeast
also,
Texas, a lot of dogs. And we used to rattle the gate because people kept guard dogs. And they didn't always have a sign, beware of dog or whatever. But now you could probably get sued for that. But at the time, nobody was suing anybody. So you would have to rattle the gate and listen and see if the dog came running around and not go inside. But I knew a sister scared to death, had a phobia of dogs in the town that I grew up in. And she rattled the gate. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later. Actually, the person she was working with told me about it. She rattled the gate, no dog came. So she opened the gate and went inside. And the dog came running out from under the house. And I'm talking, it wasn't a pit bull, but it was a guard dog, a trained dog. This is not a little squeaky puppy. And this is a big dog.
Is he racist now?
Face. And she was short. So leaps up at her.
He's racist. Yeah, well, dog says.
Throws her hands out.
I mean, it's literally still racist. But what's wrong with the pit bull, dude?
Chokes the dog, and the dog dies. Not making this up. And the person she was working with didn't really know what to do. What do you do? The dog's trying to bite her and she's grabbed the dog by the throat. Some of the situations that we had to go through as unpaid volunteers is just ridiculous. And the dogs were a big problem in some of the places I lived. You had to be careful. I've been bit. I've been bit by dogs.
I was chased by a dog once in Dallas territory. Yeah.
Because you don't always know. You don't always know if they have a dog. You can't always tell. People didn't always keep their dogs. They didn't always follow leash law and stuff like that.
Yeah. I had one chase me down the sidewalk, and the sister that I was working with, both of us had to stand our ground and scare it off.
Yeah. My brother, he's had to smack dogs with his book bag and knock them over and stuff. And
smack that dog, dude.
The householder got the dog to protect their home. And whether you rattled the gate or did whatever you could do or whatever, you walk into their yard. And then you hurt, or like that sister, you kill their dog. Oh, God. What do you think that's going to do?
And I'm a dog lover.
The message. It's just the whole thing. It's just a mess. The whole thing.
It was a mess.
Yeah. Okay, I got one last experience, and the reason why I've got so many is because I pioneered for so many years. Just a lot of stuff happened, especially in the weird rurals of Louisiana. But when I was in Virginia, which I talked about earlier, I was going out in service one morning, and we went to go pick up a sister who lived in a nursing home. And my roommate would always pick her up for the Sunday morning. And she was just sweet old sister, but she was senile. She was losing her mind. And she would often forget or not realize who she was or how old she was. So I was sitting in the back seat with her, and we were just talking. We get up to the door. My roommate and the other brother that's in the car, they get out to go work the door. And the sister turns to me. She's like 85 years old. Keep that in mind. She turns to me and she says, I don't know if we should be in the back seat alone. People might talk.
That's awesome.
People might talk. And I was like, well. And I tried to play it off and I go, well, I think it'll be okay this
She had
time.
a good sense of humor.
They're right there at the door. They can see us. It's okay. You know.
That is hilarious.
I don't know. Maybe she was a tasty dish when she was younger. I don't know.
That is too funny.
Oh, yeah. But she was such a sweetheart. Well, that's all I got as far as experience goes. You know.
Yeah,
A lot
same
of
here.
stuff.
Yeah, I was a solid publisher. I was out every weekend. And when my work schedule changed, I ended up doing a lot of midweek witnessing, which I actually prefer.
Oh god, it's coming for
working
me.
midweek because it was a different crowd of people. I mean, there was also a lot of
Okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Out all the time, but yeah, I liked it. I have to
Back
say,
when
life,
this was current, I would have
tolerated
probably
service.
died.
You know,
I tried to make the
wasn't-
best of it.
It wasn't
See, there's
all
those
bad. So we've talked
big
about
goblins
it,
outside,
which is not
and they
everything
instantly
is bad. There was
aim
a
at you
lot
at a
more
healer.
involved in all those things.
And
You
if the
definitely
cast
had a
gets
lot more
through, well, you can
experience,
probably survive one of
experiences, I should
them,
say,
maybe, I don't remember.
I
But
auxiliary
there's
time
two of them, and if there's a group that
my entire life.
doesn't, well, acknowledge
I'll
that they
say
have
it,
to
I
kill
figured
those
you took
goblins,
enough of my blood, Watchtower.
well, you as a healer are
Of my
fucked,
life.
because those
That was
two
my logic.
skills will probably
Took enough
hit
of my
you
life,
at
not
the
putting
same
any
time,
hours
or
into
even
it.
if they not, you
I'm not
usually,
putting any more hours in
if I remember
than it
correctly,
takes.
you
Level.
usually
So
even
I was
died
solid. I
from
put
one
8 to 10
cast
hours
because
in.
there's a lot of other
Yeah,
damage
thank you for
happening at the
sharing
same time, and you
your-
just
your
die because of the
experiences.
AoE bullshit.
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
So many.
But again, if you see a
See,
child
these two,
or
oh, three of
teenager
them,
at your door,
and I'll have
humor
aggro.
them, don't try
Oh,
to
God.
wake them up. And I get emails all the time from people. I love the witnesses. They're just lost. They're misled, or that people have these opinions about the witnesses. And I know that they're being sincere. They're being genuine. They want to help them, but that is the last place.
Yeah.
Don't try to wake them up, especially if a kid is giving their presentation. Humor them. Be nice to them. They don't want to be there.
Yeah, and they're probably scared to death. Someone from their school is
Oh,
going to
God,
see
yes.
them. I know. I used to have that fear.
Same here.
Oh,
Same here.
I think Jimmy lives here. I hope he's not home.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're already
Stacy
have-
lives at this house. Oh God.
They're a
You know.
nervous wreck as it is. So you can
Yeah.
cut them some slack if you can.
Yeah, cut them some slack. Well, do you have anything else to share?
Nope, that's it for me. You?
Yeah. Same here. Thank you guys for following us on this journey, this literal walk down memory lane about field service.
You put your hours in for today, so now you're good.
Now you're good.
Now there's Jacob and Sophia video.
Lesson 2. Obey Jehovah.
What? No. I don't give a crap about Yahweh. Oh, that's one of those old ones where they look really, really disturbing.
Oh no, it's Sparlock! Caleb! We need someone to save us!
Caleb.
Sparlock can activate your
Caleb.
magic, Sparlock!
Hi. How was school today?
Fine. Look at Sparlock's magic
Caleb.
Wait, I've seen this
What
already.
is that?
It's Sparlock, the warrior wizard!
Whoa, a warrior wizard.
First of all, that's just ridiculous, okay? You can either be a warrior or a wizard, not both. Something like
Yes,
that
you
would
can.
just be unbeatable. A healer and a tank, forget about it.
Yeah, my friend gave it to me.
But a wizard is not a healer.
The movie. Can I see it too?
Fake nerd
Oh,
detected.
your friend gave this to you.
She looks like she's thinking, I'm gonna murder that bitch.
You look pretty excited about this. Why don't you come over here and get your snack, okay?
Come eat your
Smack.
snack while I think up some really sinister shit to do about this.
Is this toy magical?
Mm-hmm.
It's a warrior wizard. What do you think, you retard?
Caleb, who likes magic? Jehovah
Satan.
or Satan?
Oh man, I totally forgot that bit in the Bible about not suffering a witch to live. I guess God doesn't like magic. But this is going a little far, isn't it? Who gives a shit? It's a kid's toy. I remember when I was little, I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter. There are probably some people out there from fundamentalist families that had to deal with the same thing.
Satan.
Right. Magic is bad. That's why Jehovah hates it.
This literally makes me want to vomit. I heard the same shit when I was a little kid. Just hearing the name Jehovah makes me cringe now.
Do you really want to play with something that Jehovah hates?
Who cares? Who cares? It's a toy.
Do you remember who we learned about at family worship?
Whoa, where did that book come from? That came out of nowhere.
Who is this?
Adam and Eve.
Right.
Looked a little more like Adam and Steve to me in that picture.
Did they obey Jehovah?
No, they disobeyed Jehovah.
Okay, I just want to go on a little rant here. I want to point out that they keep saying the words obey and obedience. Obey carries a specific connotation. It implies you're supposed to follow unquestioningly. Obey your master. This cartoon is directed towards children. I remember hearing the word obey constantly when I was a little kid. Obey your parents, obey God, on and on and on. I'm sorry, I don't obey anybody. I follow rules, but I don't blindly follow anybody without question. That's how a society thrives, with free thinkers. This is grade A propaganda pushed out by the Watchtower Society, the corporation that owns the Jehovah's Witnesses cult.
And he got very sad.
So what if you disobey Jehovah and play with toys he doesn't like?
Literally nothing. Nothing will happen. Except you might get disfellowshipped. I know this kid's not too happy about it. Look, kid, just ditch this bullshit and play with your warrior wizard. Take it from me, Jehovah isn't gonna do shit. Watchtower Society might come after you, but you're better off without them. Trust me, even if you have to give up your family and friends.
Do you think Jehovah will be happy or sad?
Yeah, you want to please Jehovah like a young boy should. You know exactly how he likes it. Now get to work and please him.
Sad.
Yeah. Do you want Jehovah to be sad?
Yes.
No! I don't want Jehovah to be sad.
No, I don't want Jehovah to be sad with you either.
And by the way, what's with this bug-eyed freak anyways? Could her eyes possibly be further apart? She looks like Gary Busey over here. She just needs bigger teeth and she'd be a spitting image. She's got the craziness locked down.
So what do you think you should do with this toy?
I think you just told him what he should do with the toy. What if he said, I think I should keep it? What would you say? You'd sit there and dance around it for another 3 hours until he said, fine, I'll give the motherfucker up. Is that what you wanted?
Yep, we gotta disfellowship him. Bye!
Caleb, I am so proud of you. You made Mommy
Wait,
very
he's in the
And you
no,
know
wait,
what
at this
happened?
point you can't disfellowship one, right? Because
Vomit.
Jehovah loves you
They
very
aren't,
much
like-
for obeying him, Caleb.
yeah, you can just shun him, you can't disfellowship him because he doesn't actually follow at this point, right? He's too young, right?
They are so good at putting out fake plastic material. I vomited all over my keyboard and I had to spend 15 minutes cleaning it up afterward. Seriously, this is crazy. On B, C, and E in order of discovery. There was a D, but it's largely been refuted. The reason is I hijacked your browser. You can't switch websites until you like this video. No, I'm just kidding. Don't.
Stop attacking the thing, idiots. Attack the boss.
Lifetime of healing. Now you and decay! Wither away! Wither away! Quickly now! Wither away!
Ow. Pretty sure that was just me being shit, because yeah, you just have to heal that. You have to counter heal that bullshit. I was just... I'm an idiot.
Away! Fear my name. Wither away. Quickly now. Fear my name.
I'm out of range. I need to get closer.
I'll lead the way.
This power, you will be the first to know it. A lifetime of healing. Now you shall fuel disease and decay! Wither away!
It's still recharging.
Oh, I did it again.
Wither away! Quickly now!
Many deals for a friend of the Grummels. Like you. I have many lucky doos. You like?
Watch your back.
What's on your mind?
I cannot use that item yet. Open for business.
Meine Güte.
I'm out of...
Thoughtless Jester back again. Like, share, and subscribe.
And perhaps I'll figure out if I hold my phone to one side, it'll make a video that actually fills the screen. I'm not sure how it works. Probably witchcraft. Seriously though, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? We've had smartphones for like a decade now. How haven't we fixed this? I get that sometimes people actually want the video to look like that for like phone apps and stuff, but he uploaded it to YouTube and it just looks stupid here. I could zoom in fully, but I really don't want to be looking up his nose for the rest of the runtime. Gonna have to go with a happy medium.
It's called the
Slightly
flurf
zoomed in,
effect.
blurred background, still looks crap, but at least it's less crap.
Always talking lots of shit. Enjoy it. Talk with me. Spread.
Oop. No thanks. Last time I did that, they kicked me out of the all-you-can-eat restaurant. The man is always wanting to censor my art. But how am I supposed to make it if I don't eat twice my body weight in food? It's a real catch-22. That is to say, catch 22 cows, let me eat them so that I can make my crap art. Literally.
Words of logic to your friends and family, even if they don't want to hear it.
Right, two problems with that. One, you're in a Sir Sick video. There are no logics here. Logic is for big lame-o loser boys. And two, why would I want to talk to my family? They are people, and people are the worst. I much prefer talking to a plate of food. It don't judge me, and when I'm done, it go in my face. Never
Oh.
A more perfect relationship does not
Shit.
exist.
So one thing my friends and family don't want to hear is about jet fuel.
I can't imagine why. I mean, what could be more interesting than a conversation every goddamn time you come to visit than one about a burny liquid? I mean, there's so much to talk about. It makes planes go, I mean, that's just about all it does. But you could stretch that out into hours and hours of fun time entertainment if you just repeat yourself over and over again.
And how it's kind of a hoax. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Well, yeah, we all know that it's...
Agony, how do you...
It's a hoax? What? And an obvious one at that? Well, that's new. Don't quite know what to say to that. I think I'm going to need to take a moment to really process it. But I did tell you that this was the land of logic less. Thanks for proving my point.
Now, just to give you a little bit of history, I have been a part of my local volunteer fire department.
Oh, thank God. For a minute there, I thought you were going to tell me that you were something completely and totally unrelated to the aviation industry. That your expertise were completely and utterly unconnected to anything even remotely to do with aeronautical engineering, and that everything you had to say about it would almost certainly be an argument from ignorance. But thankfully, that's not the case. Everybody knows that fire engines are actually airplanes.
I was an officer, a lieutenant, and served 5 years in my local department, and I'm still a part of it and hang out, do some events with them once in a while, and I'm definitely...
Look, before we go further into this, if true, I think it's great that you served in the emergency services. It's very laudable. However, that being the case, does in no way mean that your understanding of anything outside of that role will be anything even remotely comparable to that of experts.
You just have to heal that, I think.
Field.
There is no way to get around agony.
Specialized education and or training.
Looking to go back into that type of work when some other things that I'm doing right now kind of fade off, and I guess...
And what important things are those? Do they involve the misunderstanding and misrepresentation of facts and or science? I'll bet they are. And while I do think they are incredibly silly things to do, I'm always hard pressed to say that I think they should stop, because, well, it's so incredibly fun to mock people for it, and I would be sad to see it disappear. Although that is entirely academic.
This power, you will be the first to know it. Lifetime of healing. Now you shall fuel disease and decay. Wither away. Quickly now. Wither away. Wither away. Quickly now. Wither away.
What a nice waste of time. Pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I used to leave this boss after like 2 or 3 wipes back in the day too, because there were a lot of people that just could not do this fight. As you see, as you could see, they just ran away. You have to DPS as much as possible. The boss has to die as quick as possible. You can't. I'm not sure if the scaling right now is out of whack, but I remember that it was, even back in the day, it was extremely hard to out heal this debuff. The boss just has to die. The person that runs away has to deal damage to the boss, and they just did nothing. Just ran away and didn't do anything else.
This was once a place of peace, a place for eternal rest.
I'm not 100% sure though if you can do anything against agony, if you can prevent it or cure it somehow. I don't remember. I think you can't. I think that's just like a soft enrage, basically. As soon as that shit starts, your team just basically has to pull the heroism and all of the cooldowns, and it just has to be over after like 30 seconds. I think that was the only way how you could do this.
Academic, as you are all still humans, and humans will always make the stupids. Thank the Lordy Lord.
And then I'll jump back into that. It's good to have the training, it's important, but what I've come to the conclusion about, thanks to that information and that training, is how much water is in a truck.
How much water is in a truck? So, how much of a liquid that isn't jet fuel is in a vehicle that isn't an airplane? How very useful!
One of the 5,000 gallon water tankers, and how much volume is in one of those. And then I started to look at how much fuel is in an Airbus 380, which is kind of comparable to a 737.
Okay, first off, are you sure you don't mean like the 747? Because even that isn't as goddamn big as an Airbus 380, and the 737 is smaller than that. But I am interested to see what the relationship between those two other things are in regards to your point. You know, between an approximately 10-ton or so truck and a nearly 300-ton flying machine. Other than, of course, the fact that you just don't understand how goddamn big one of them actually is.
Or even a 747.
All very big, again, especially compared to a truck. Just making sure that's crystal clear before you say something incredibly embarrassing.
And if you look it up, it says 240,000 liters, which is 240 tons.
Well, that does sound like a lot. Oh, if only 245,000 liters were, say, 50,000 gallons, so 10 times the previously mentioned 5,000 gallon truck. So a vehicle that is, at bare minimum, 14 times larger in terms of weight, if we're talking about the smaller craft, it would be suddenly very reasonable for it to carry that now quite logical number, if one were to spend more than half a femtosecond considering the actual numbers. But since we aren't doing that, jet fuel is fake, I guess.
Of fuel.
Yeah,
Google it
exactly.
yourself, look it up yourself. 240 tons of fuel in one of those jet airliners.
You might want to steer people away from Google, mate, lest they look things up. Like, how big is an airplane? Or perhaps even look up pictures like these, showing the sheer difference in scale we are talking about, and making you look like a gibbering fool. I mean, even I didn't realise just how bloody enormous jet engines can get these days. Like, oof. God damn, that's a big boy. That'd be a hell of a way to go too, wouldn't it? Ah, sweet chunky oblivion.
Now my question for you is, how strong are cantilevers? Cantilevers are the archways that are holding up the wing, and they're made of aluminum.
I would counter with, are you an aircraft engineer? Because I certainly...
Also, aluminium is really...
answer such a question.
He's
So
probably
why don't
gonna
we
say
both go off, or are you
aluminium
simply
is
taking
really
the question?
malleable and can't
It's always
handle that
simple
shit.
answer, and then think to
Dude,
yourself,
do you know? Well,
yeah,
well,
I'm very smart.
obviously he doesn't. But aluminium is
have to
really, really
assume
strong at a certain
That
point.
where the fuel is located is in the wings, because that's kind of what they tell you. They say, well, some of it's in the belly of the plane, but that's where your luggage goes, so not too much.
Actually, we don't have to assume anything at all. In fact, you literally told us to Google things earlier. You know what we can search for? Fuel tanks on an Airbus 380. Ta-da! And nope, no fuel in the fuselage, really. Do you ever get sick and tired of being wrong all the time? I know I do, but then I know I'm an idiot. That's why I look up what the experts say. Like the moron that I am.
Maybe, let's guess, 50,000 liters, 50 tons is in the body of the airplane. And then the additional 100 tons, the additional 200 tons.
You don't have to guess. It's all right here. And no, in fact, there is more than that in the 380's wings. And it doesn't even truly have fuel in the fuselage. It has a bit at the back there called the trim tank, which is less than half of your guess of 50,000. So perhaps you should stop guessing. Because if you don't know, bringing things up as if you do really, really harms your points.
Are in each of the wings. So 100 tons in each wing. How strong are cantilevers? Now, when you've flown, even nationally or internationally, like in a 737, I know they're not completely full.
I'm sorry, what? Are you messing with me? Are you actually serious? You didn't misspeak. You are actually dumb enough to think that an Airbus 380 and a Boeing 737 are even remotely similar passenger aircraft. The fuel capacity of the 380 is indeed about 250 tons. It is a massive, multi-leveled aircraft with wings twice my height and engines bigger than some people's homes. The fuel capacity of the 737 is 26 tons, max. That's a 20th of the capacity. It is frankly tiny in comparison. No wonder you are confused as to where all that fuel is going when you are basically comparing a motorised children's scooter to a Sherman tank and wondering why it only takes a second to fill up the scooter with fuel. You colossal buffoon.
Even if there was 20 tons in each wing.
There wouldn't be, but perhaps if you literally had any idea what you were talking about, you wouldn't look like quite so much of a moron. In fact, no, you give morons like me a bad name. We are going to have to come up with a new word for you. I'm thinking dib-dab-tastic.
When you look at the wings bouncing in turbulence, doing that, does that look like the action of 100 tons or 50 tons or 20 tons?
No, it looks like fire. Because, oh look, we Googled things again. Oh no! And found out yet another thing you were wrong about. As the fuel distribution on the aircraft you were actually talking about is in fact centered in the fuselage. Oh, if only you had taken your own advice before turning your camera on. C'est la vie.
Not even to mention the fact of the physical... It's physically impossible to fit that much fluid in the wing of the airplane. The wings aren't that big.
Which wings? The right ones or the wrong ones? Because, yeah, actually, the 380 has bloody enormous wings. The airplane with the actual 250-ton capacity actually has a 250-ton capacity. Go figure. The small one does not. It has a 5-ish ton capacity for its wings. And I can't believe you made me look this stuff up, because you didn't bother looking it up yourself. If you had, you would almost certainly not have made this video. Although, considering your attitude, I wouldn't be surprised if you concluded that the stats of the aeroplanes are wrong. Couldn't be you, right?
Do you know how much 100,000 liters is?
The internet is fake.
One of those fuel tankers in that you see, a double fuel tanker. I was speaking to a fuel tanker driver, and he says it holds about 26,000 liters. So you would need 4 of those double tankers on each wing.
You see, the fact that you are talking about two completely different machines, I understand how, if for whatever reason I thought that the stats for the larger one applied to the smaller, I would sit there looking at it and think, this is absurd, this cannot be right. And where you went with, someone must be lying to me, I would go with, what don't I know? What have I screwed up? And what have I misunderstood? Then I would search and search until I did understand and maybe ask questions of experts instead of asking my families or a bunch of randos on YouTube who know as little as me. That's the difference between you and me. Well, that and I am the most handsomest, more famouser and better at doing a sex.
Or in each wing, really. Inside the wings. That's just not physically possible. You gotta think about it.
You first, Dib-Dab-tastic.
You gotta watch them fuel it using a 4-inch coupler and a 4-inch hose, and they fuel that for about 10-15 minutes usually. Not much more time than that. How much fuel can you get out of a 4-inch line in that amount of time? Now,
oh, I don't know, probably less than about 26,000 litres, I would say. Not like they were trying to put in well over 250,000, but then they probably knew what kind of aeroplane they were fueling. Good job that's not your job, eh? That'd be kind of a nightmare, I think.
The fuel line is not bouncing or vibrating, and as a fireman, when I was in a situation when we're pumping at 200 plus gallons per minute, the hose lines would tighten and vibrate because of so much pressure.
It's amazing all the stupid things that you can end up saying when your basic premise is so thoroughly wrong. Because even if the things you say afterwards are technically correct, because you didn't bother to check, it all comes out like the ravings of a dribbling fool. I'm just going to skip any of the bits based purely on your misapplied info, just for everyone's sanity's sake. Don't get me wrong, it's still funny to go, haha, no, but we got to lay this puppy to rest, really, haven't we?
Are they filling the wings with that much fuel, or are they lying to us? Now, when you listen to an airliner spool up as the jet airliner begins to build thrust, you hear a whizzing sound, a whirring sound.
Let me guess.
A what sound?
Now, I mean, I could look it up, but I think we all enjoy a guess a lot more. Because who needs facts? It's the sound of 8,000 angry parakeets screaming inside the engine. That's what makes them go. And the fuel is used to spark little fires under their buttholes to make them scream. Sounds about right, yeah?
You don't see a bunch of exhaust, right? As it's burning all this fuel, there's usually exhaust. No, it burns it so clean, so clear, it's so perfect. You don't even see that. Don't worry about that.
Do you mean smoke? Because, yeah, you do. I mean, less so from modern engines, but it's definitely a thing they do. Especially the much older ones. Look at that one. Christ.
Whoa.
Of course, anything coming out of them is exhaust anyway. Whether that is air, carbon dioxide, or custard. And now I want to see that just to imagine how much the conspiracy theorists would freak out over custard trails.
And the sound you hear, that whirring, whistling, is a compressor, an air compressor. Because air being compressed with a small amount of fuel is how it actually works. They're lying to us.
Wow, that's just amazing. Jet engines aren't one of these. It's just some kind of magic air compressor that somehow converts jet fuel into energy more efficiently than just burning it, pretty much. By having extra steps, it actually makes that fuel have more energy than it otherwise would have. Because, you know, nothing makes a machine more efficient than adding points where energy will be released as waste heat or sound. You are just an amazing person.
On so many levels, selling us fuel, selling us ideas about fossil fuels. Look into that yourself. Come to your own conclusions.
Oh, God, let me guess. You believe some interesting things about those too. I bet I can guess what, but I don't want to put stupid words into others' mouths when they are just so much better at it than I am.
Do your own research. Don't let Pilot Joe tell you that, hey, don't worry, everything works fine from here, and I know because I'm a pilot, so trust me.
Yeah, don't believe experts. Believe internet cranks who can't tell the difference between two thoroughly different types of aircraft. They are the smart. Also, even if it was a lie about how it specifically works, what difference does that make? Is it none? I'm betting it's none. But whatever.
Don't trust me. Don't trust them.
Freudian slip. I love it.
Trust your own eyes. Trust logic.
trust your own eyes,
Logic.
but they can't tell you jack poop about how a jet engine works from the seat of an aeroplane. And your eyes told you two different things were the same thing. Also, logic can be flawed. That's pretty much the point of logical fallacies. Things that sound fine and logical on the surface until you dig down. I mean, this whole video is an argument from ignorance, a bit of an argument from incredulity, and a whole heap of Dunning-Kruger. I wouldn't trust your logic if it offered me Sweeties to come into its van. And I love Sweeties.
Trust scientific method, provable, repeatable, observable.
Just because people have said those things to you over and over and over again doesn't mean you can just say them back and automatically win, you absolute parody of a thinking humans.
Don't trust men, because they are liars.
Alright, I won't trust you then. Bye.
Exactly.
Guys, don't forget to panic buy sick brand merch. What if you need to let people know that you are handsome, famous and good at the sex in a variety of tasteful colours?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So next week appears to be the week of big announcements, at least from what we are hearing right now. It looks like, right now anyway, next week could have the big PS5 event to kick things off for that system, where we see games, as many rumors have been coming out pretty much over the last 24 hours, with the more and more backing as to next week being finally when we get to see something playing on a PlayStation 5 from Sony. And then even on top of that, there appears to be some sort of write-up being published in Famitsu next week that is going to be, and I quote, rile up the games industry overall, and it has to do with Sega. Okay, I'm not really sure what it will be 100%, but we'll go over some of the possibilities here and where all this is coming from. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're brand new here, hit that red subscribe button down below as we head towards 500,000 subscribers. And we're going to start today with The Avengers. Do you remember that game? Because I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. It was supposed to have been out already. It was going to come out, what, May 15th of this year? But in January, they had to push it to September, so we're all kind of waiting around to see more about it and see why they had to maybe delay it, because a lot of people were making fun of the character models because they look like the Avengers stunt doubles, and the gameplay wasn't necessarily clicking with everyone. But they are going to have a presentation later on this month. They put this tweet out here, and it says, "We've reassembled at home and are working to finish our mission. We can't wait to show you guys new gameplay and co-op in our first Marvel's Avengers War Table stream on June 24th. So I'm hoping that they did go back, not necessarily to the drawing board completely, because there wouldn't have been enough time to do that, but taken some time with this delay and maybe polished it, maybe changed a few things. We know it's going to be like a service-based or games as a service type game, so it's already going to follow that formula, but I'm hoping that the gameplay, and as they say, they show like story events, and some of the gameplay that they showed that were kind of quick flashes looked better. But I need that extended gameplay session where they take us on a story mission and see that it doesn't feel like, I guess, more of a generic games as a service game, that it has its mechanics laid out for what's supposed to keep you going for a while, and then the story is just kind of pushed in. I'd rather focus around the story and having some fun with friends as superheroes. Also, we got a look at a new Dragon Quest game yesterday. It appears to be kind of a Dragon Quest spin-off style
Translation:
game.
This game sucks. It will suck ass, because all games as a service games suck,
This is called the
and are a big rip-off, a huge rip-off.
And it is set to come out in 2021, so we are hearing about this pretty early. So early, in fact, that we don't even have consoles that it's going to come out on. It just says unspecified consoles. And if I had to take a guess, PS4, PS5, Switch, and probably PC, although their PC releases have been kind of spotty at times with Square, so who really knows on that side. But I think it'll definitely go to Switch because of the install size in Japan, and honestly, the game itself doesn't look like it's a massive quote-unquote AAA budget style game, but I think they would try to push this everywhere. I almost thought they might even try to put it on like cell phones, for example, as there were rumors leading up to this being revealed that it could have been a cell phone game. They have not told us platforms yet, so it's possible that it could go like to everything, including the Xbox maybe, but Dragon Quest typically stays on PlayStation and Nintendo platforms, but we still have a bit of a wait as it's not even coming out till 2021. But I like the idea of an action RPG smaller than like the Dragon Quest Hero style game, because that's more like a Dynasty Warrior style. I like the idea of like a smaller, almost Trials of Mana style action RPG for Dragon Quest. Oh, and we also had the Samurai Showdown Neo Geo Collection release date announced, and there are several release dates, and the Epic Game Store seemed to kind of step in here and get a bit of an advantage to start off. So let's start with that one. On June 11th, it'll be on PC on the Epic Game Store, and for that first week, it appears to just be free, is what it seems. That's interesting. June 18th, it will hit Steam, and then July 28th for the Xbox One, PS4, and the Switch. Originally, they didn't say anything about the PS4 or the Switch, or I'm sorry, the Xbox One, the PS4, and the Switch were there, but the Xbox One wasn't necessarily mentioned, but then they corrected that to Gematsu, so it looks like it's basically going everywhere. Now, that's going to be digitally initially on the Switch, the PS4, and the Xbox One, with physical copies to follow later. So that's kind of tough, because I'm not a big fan when we get digital and then physical later on, as anyone who wants to collect the game, but then also wants to play it immediately the day it comes out is going to end up double dipping on a game that they normally would not. It's Samurai Showdown, but it's Samurai Showdown 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's also an unreleased version of 5 as well that's on there, so it looks pretty good. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sega, as there apparently is a massive announcement that will rile up the gaming industry coming next week. Now, this appears to be published in the June 4th edition of Famitsu, so midweek we should find out something, as for the most part, well, these Famitsu articles leak out early, as Famitsu will get into people's hands before publication date, so we might even learn about this thing like the beginning of the week, like on Monday, like immediately. So we'll see there, but let's talk about where all of this came from, as it wasn't a live stream, but this is what they said. My column in next week's issue of Famitsu is crazy. I got a huge scoop. It's a world premiere article and an exclusive. It may not be Nikki or Weekly Bunshin, but if you want to know if it's a scoop that big, it totally is. It's a scoop from a game company that everyone loves. An insane scoop. Last year, Wired got the exclusive story on PlayStation 5, right? Other media didn't. It's that level of a scoop. I interviewed a certain company's executive and technical staff. It's really revolutionary. Really, it's a revolution. And further on in that live stream, they accidentally name-dropped Sega, it seemed, as people in the chat started to figure this out. And then they just came out and said, did I say Sega? Yeah, then it's Sega. Now, this is from the technology journalist Zenshi Nishikawa, and the fact that they're talking to technical developers on Sega's side and executives is odd, because that doesn't necessarily mean a game, because immediately you're like, oh, maybe they're talking about Sonic and they're hyping up. That's the big thing here, hyping up their article. Keep that in mind, because I knew it was going to happen immediately after this got out there. People look and say, Sega's getting into the console world again. I don't know about that. I think Sega might be done on the console side, but they did put out the Sega Genesis Mini, so I kind of was like, okay, well, let's compromise here. Let's say they really are doing the Dreamcast Mini. That would be cool. That would rile some people up, because they see the Dreamcast logo back, but would it, like, be revolutionary? I don't know. I don't think it necessarily would be. It would be exciting. Even if it was the Saturn Mini, that would still be exciting, but I do think Dreamcast name and logo, it would get people more excited than the Saturn name and logo. But what else could do it? Well, maybe they have an exclusivity deal for several titles lined up with someone like Microsoft, who's been pretty buddy-buddy with Sega recently, even going as far as to get Phantasy Star Online 2 over to the West, which is something that had never happened ever. And then here comes Microsoft, and all of a sudden it's on the Xbox and just launched on PC. So maybe they have some kind of deal where they're getting some of their back catalog of IPs, doing remasters, or maybe even full remakes.
Yeah, that's what I think
like a
too.
Set number of like 4 or 5 titles. Hey, if that's what it takes to go get Jet Set Radio and bring it up to current times,
probably a lot of remakes.
The other thing that people
or
are
Xbox
out,
and PC.
I really have a hard time with this one. I would be thinking that a console would be more likely than this, and people are wondering if Microsoft could have outright bought Sega, like straight up. I would be shocked if that was the case. Really shocked. I think it's more likely that it could be, just going by what they're saying here, because they could be hyping up something like a Sonic game, and they got the scoop on it. But the idea of them pointing out the PS5 with Wired, the fact they're talking to executives and the technical side of Sega, does kind of make me think about hardware, and hey, maybe that Dreamcast Mini really is happening. That's like, if I had to pick something out of all of that, all of the ridiculous thoughts here of what it could be, alright, let's go with the Dreamcast Mini. Here's hoping. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation 5, as it appears that, at least for now, based on rumors, next week is when we will get our first big-time look at games for the system, maybe even the console, maybe an explanation on features around the DualSense controller, the OS layout. The possibilities are endless, but it seems like since this rumor came out yesterday morning, and I did a video as soon as the rumor dropped on the second channel, so if you did not see that, go check it out. But it seemed like after that information got out there, more and more backing started to come up for it as people started to elaborate on Twitter a bit more and back it. Originally, Jeff Grubb really started talking a bit about it, teasing it on Twitter. Then Jason Schreier and Takashi Machizuki released an article about it, and then I see people like Tom Phillips from Eurogamer talk about how this also appears to be a thing, and that because it is so close now, they'd be surprised if it was moved or canceled or anything like that internally. So I am at this point expecting an announcement from Sony either today or tomorrow. Monday would be the absolute latest, but I think they want to give everyone, like, I guess, a weekend to kind of do any previews or anything specifically in the press as they get ready for this event next week, as long as everything holds up like it seems that everyone is saying that it will. So, what exactly is going to happen here? Well, it seems that a lot of people, specifically even Jeff Grubb on VentureBeat, kind of went on and talked a bit about how Sony should be showing games there first and foremost, as that's what they want to lead off with, but they won't necessarily show pricing or maybe even the system itself, although that would be kind of weird, because they have in mind the idea of the Xbox 2020 that Microsoft is doing, and that they would want to have several events for the PlayStation 5 over the next couple of months leading up to its release, which kind of makes sense. I almost feel like they want to show the games, they maybe want to show the console and the features, and then
I'm gonna take a break.
They might even do
but
the price
I'll
in
do
like
the
a press release or an announcement
last two runs out
rather than
for my
put
break.
it in
So
any type of
yeah.
video or presentation
Bye.
that they do.
See you in
Keep in
like
mind,
half an
these
hour.
should be